Do you want to know why you feel a certain way, why those fears might make sense? And most importantly, do you want to feel better? Here's the problem. Understanding a pattern often doesn't loosen its grip. In reality, it may be more biology than psychology. A bad night of sleep can wreck your emotional balance. A pill can sometimes change suffering faster than years of therapy or explanation. This episode is about a hard truth. Physiology often beats understanding. Let's explore the issues and figure out what might work for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Bobby Du Bois, and welcome to Live Long and Well, a podcast where we will talk about what you can do to live as long as possible and with as much energy and vigor that you wish. Together, we will explore what practical and evidence-supported steps you can take. Come join me on this very important journey, and I hope that you feel empowered along the way. I'm a physician, Ironman triathlete, and have published several hundred scientific studies. I'm honored to be your guide. Welcome, men of one nation and my dear listeners, to episode number 69, Physiology Beats Understanding. Why insight alone so often fails to relieve depression, anxiety, fear, and everyday emotional suffering. In a recent episode, I explored with you one of the mind's built-in biases, pattern recognition. We human beings are constantly looking for explanations. And that tendency is not pathological, it's just human. Today, I want to explore a deeper question. What if finding that pattern doesn't actually solve the problem or make you happier? What if understanding why you feel sad or anxious isn't the answer, and perhaps changing your biology or brain chemistry or brain wiring might be the solution? If you struggled with anxiety, sadness, or just trying to be happy, or loved ones have been in therapy for a long time without great success, then join me on this podcast journey. There may be insights or approaches you haven't considered. And perhaps share this episode with others. This episode might be helpful to them. And I hope, being a general listener, might be useful as well. I'm going to begin with a humorous analogy, not to poke fun at psychotherapy, but to get today's theme across as vividly as possible. Let's say you have a bee sting allergy, where you have a pretty severe allergic reaction from a bee sting. Asking, why did the bee sting me? Or what did I do to deserve this? Isn't going to be particularly helpful. Understanding the bee's motives may be interesting, but it's not immunotherapy, which is what your body likely needs. And in a surprising number of psychological problems, something similar is true. A lot of suffering seems to improve not with greater insight, but when something changes the state of the organism, your physiology or the chemistry in your body. Now, that might happen with taking a few deep breaths, a good night's sleep, medication, electroconvulsive therapy for depression, or vagal nerve stimulation. Now, I'm not recommending cocaine, obviously, and I've never tried it, but apparently it makes you up, confident, and happy within seconds. Clearly a chemical effect. So why this topic? And here comes the least scientific part of the episode. Me, two experiences separated by 20 years. In my 30s and 40s, I had dysthymia. Now, that isn't frank depression, but it's a low level of feeling not very happy. I tried psychotherapy, I meditated a lot, I gained lots of understanding, but I didn't really feel better. Then I noticed a clue to the path forward. If I drank strong coffee with lots of caffeine, I immediately, for a short time, felt more upbeat. Of course, it didn't last. Thinking about this information, a psychiatrist recommended Wellbutrin, a common antidepressant that he thought would uniquely help. After 2 decades of not feeling particularly happy, I started the drug. And essentially, within one day, the dysthymia disappeared and never returned, as long as I continued taking the medication. Well, as you might guess, as an N of 1 fan over the years, I experimented by stopping the Wellbutrin. Within a week or so, the symptoms started to return and immediately resolved with restarting the drug. Now, I've tested this many, many times over the last few decades, and other members of my family had similar experiences. So we likely have a genetic chemical issue in our brain. Now, I know that this is pure anecdote, not evidence. And I know that it isn't the typical antidepressant timeline. The deeper antidepressant response typically takes longer. But in my case, the activating, energizing effect of the drug seemed to change something within days that years of understanding had not. This was the seed for this episode planted 20 years ago, that understanding where my problems may have come from didn't make me happier. A tiny drug did. And after that, knowing where things came from, frankly, didn't really matter. And now I'm exploring something different. I'm a very happy person overall. With this podcast, my dear wife, Gail, the rest of my family, my triathlons, caring for Madrone Springs Ranch and our kangaroos and other exotic animals, and our bed and breakfast guests. But when I exercise, I often have fears that happen. Fear that I can't handle the discomfort, don't have enough energy to continue, and fear that I'll quit and feel ashamed that I did quit. As an Ironman triathlete, those fears rob a lot of joy from something that is a big part of my life. I spent years trying to understand that fear, meditating on it, observing it. No success. But there is a physiologic or brain rewiring approach to handle fears that I thought might be worth trying. EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, because it targets the fear response pretty directly and helps the brain become desensitized to those memories and fears. As an open-minded skeptic, I wondered whether this physiology-directed approach might help. I'll explain more below, but it has already made a difference. So, 2 situations where understanding the problem didn't help, but changing the physiology did. Besides me, how often do human beings mistake explanation for treatment? I think all of us do some version of this, whether we've ever been in therapy or not. We search for explanations. Why am I like this? Why do I keep reacting this way? Why do I fear this? Why can't I stop doing that? We are explanation-hungry creatures. We don't like randomness, and we don't like uncertainty. So when we suffer, we go looking for a story. It makes root causes like inflammation or leaky gut or adrenal fatigue so appealing for medical problems. And finding the childhood source of psychological problems seems so important. And that search makes sense. Finding an explanation gives us a feeling of order. It gives us a feeling of progress. But But one of the traps of being human is that the discovery of a story can create an illusion of progress. Explanation is not the same as feeling better. Here's a common example. We all know what a bad night or two of sleep does to us. We're irritable, more reactive, less able to handle stress. The world feels tougher and problems feel bigger. And then, after a good night's sleep, life looks different again. Getting a good night's sleep doesn't give us a better understanding of our childhood. I haven't heard someone say, well, I got 8 hours of good sleep and I finally understand where my problems came from. Instead, we know something more basic happened. Physiology changed our emotional state. We even have sayings for this. Sleep on it, or things will look better after a good night's sleep. And this just isn't intuition. A 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis pulled together more than 50 years of sleep loss research and found that not enough sleep worsened emotional functioning. Poor sleep, not surprisingly, made people feel worse and handle emotions less well. In my recent episode on stress, I made the point that some interventions help stress because they settle the stress response itself, the adrenaline surges, the shakiness, the feeling of unsteadiness. Breathwork was one of these. A breath before that big speech, before that hard conversation, or before shooting a gun. Physiology, not understanding, settles the body. In a 2023 randomized controlled study with 100 people, 5 minutes of daily structured breathing exercises improved mood and reduced anxiety. And people's bodies were less revved up afterwards. Here's one way to look at it. The body might change first, and then the mind and our emotions catch up. So if sleep and breath already teach us this lesson in ordinary life, which all of us can easily experience, what do we see for psychological problems like depression? Back to my Wellbutrin story. What struck me was not that I felt better. It was that a change in physiology appeared to accomplish in a day what years of insight had not. Now, of course, my story isn't evidence. It did motivate me to look for evidence to see what's been studied. Here's a really clear example of how changing our physiology or brain chemistry can be dramatic. Electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. Under general anesthesia, an electrical stimulus or shock is applied to the brain, producing a controlled seizure. It's generally reserved for severe depression or treatment-resistant depression, and frankly isn't that common today. But ECT is one of the clearest examples of physiology beating understanding. Nobody thinks ECT works because the patient has arrived at a better narrative. In the British journal Lancet, a meta-analysis of 6 randomized trials of 250 patients found a really significant improvement in depression symptoms, often within days to a few weeks of beginning ECT treatment. Patients may relapse, but the near-term impact is very real. ECT changes brain chemistry. Its benefit is not from understanding the source of the problem. Another dramatic example is implantable vagus nerve stimulation for treatment-resistant depression. In this approach, a surgeon places a small pulse generator under the skin of the chest with a wire connected to the left vagus nerve in the neck. The device sends regular electrical pulses into a major nerve that links the brain with the body's internal organs. This is not first-line treatment, and it's not for ordinary depression. But it's another reminder that mood is not just a story we tell ourselves. It's also a biological state that can sometimes be altered by changing the body's signaling pathways. A 2025 systematic review based upon 900 patients across a variety of, now admittedly observational studies, found evidence for substantial benefit. A third to half of folks responded well, and many stayed in remission. Then there's psilocybin, which I would place in the category of early, promising, and very experimental. Part of the psilocybin excitement is the idea of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its connections and patterns. Recent reviews suggest that psilocybin may temporarily increase plasticity, which could make negative thought patterns and their wiring easier to change. Let's turn to a particular type of psychotherapy. Not just understanding where a fear or problem came from, but an active intervention to reduce those fears. Desensitization therapy is like our bee discussion, but rather than giving you allergy shots of bee extract, you are experiencing small doses of the fear in a controlled and safe fashion. If you have, say, a fear of heights, then you revisit the fears while you climb up a few stairs. Then more of them, then eventually to significant heights. Or get close to a snake if that is your fear, then eventually hold it. And some psychotherapies work precisely because they're not mainly about understanding. With desensitization therapy, you have repeated exposure, learn how to calm the alarm response, and gradually relearn a more positive relationship with that experience. In a meta-analysis of 16 studies of desensitization therapy for fear of heights, anxiety fell substantially. Like ECT, the improvements may lessen over time. And now we get back to EMDR, which is a type of desensitization therapy, but using a different approach to brain rewiring. In simple terms, EMDR is a structured therapy where, in this case, I call up a memory of that exercise-related fear and discomfort while I watch a ball swing back and forth on a screen. It's been studied a lot in folks with PTSD who have clear traumatic moments or memories that trigger fears. It isn't exactly clear why reliving painful experiences while you shift your eyes left and right helps, but it seems to help. Does the bilateral focus put our brain in a better place to rewire? We just don't know. In a meta-analysis of 12 randomized trials and about 700 people, EMDR was substantially more successful in reducing those memory-related fears than no treatment. It was less convincing when compared to other treatment approaches. I'm giving it a try. I don't have PTSD, but it may be helpful. Stay tuned. Now, I'm not presenting my experience as evidence, but I am struck by the possibility that I may still feel the bodily reality of exertion, the discomfort or the shortness of breath, while losing some of the fears that have become connected to those sensations. Before moving on, I want to clarify that insight therapy can be really helpful for grief, relationship challenges, approaching difficult life choices, and making sense of old patterns. The target of my skepticism is not therapy. Insight can be true, deep, and moving, but may not reduce your emotional pain. And that brings us back to the larger human lesson. Whether we're in therapy or not, we are always trying to make sense of ourselves. That search is natural. It's human. It's often useful. It's just not always sufficient. Relief often comes when our physiology changes. The mind loves stories. Sometimes the nervous system just needs retraining. And that is why so often physiology beats understanding. Please share this episode with others who you think might benefit. We all want to be happy and face life with less struggles. Perhaps this will help. And of course, I hope that the podcast in general is fun, interesting, and useful. Let me know what you've experienced, what types of therapy worked for you, and perhaps more importantly, what hasn't worked. Perhaps I can summarize what folks share in an upcoming episode. As always, I hope that you live long and well and experience happiness in your life. If understanding hasn't solved the issues for you, perhaps some of the approaches I've talked about might be worth considering. Until next time, I am Dr. Bobby, and I read a whole lot of studies, so you don't have to. Thanks so much for listening to Live Long and Well with Dr. Bobby. If you like this episode, please provide a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen. If you want to continue this journey or want to receive my newsletter on practical and scientific ways to improve your health and longevity, please visit me at drbobbylivlongandwell.com. That's doctor as in DR, Bobby, livelongandwell.com.